So first question I've sorted through, and I thank the folks who've helped to sort these out. First question to Chip about compulsory integration and home rule and other states. Could you compare the laws here, and also the SGEIS specifically compared to other states?
Well, you heard the question. Well, simply put, Governor Rick Perry would proudly sign the Lifton bill because home rule applies to drilling in the state of Texas. I know that comes as a shock to you, Barbara. I know it probably comes as a shock to Rick Perry. But yeah, in the same paragraph or sentence. How about that? So the catch is, though, is that the SGEIS is actually kind of unusual. The only state that I know of that has something quite similar to it, it was Colorado. And in the case, as Ed mentioned, in the case of Colorado, in other words, the state has as of 2008, has a very comprehensive drilling regulation regime. But in the case of Colorado, to get there, they incorporated input, direct panel input from the municipalities and the counties. So what they came up with was a composite of what the State Minerals Management Agency, the counties, and the towns wanted. But actually, this SGEIS approach, I think part of the problem with it, on the one hand, it's not a bad idea because for an unincorporated area, it plausibly could become good regulations. The problem is that when it comes to an incorporated area, which is the way regulations would work in New Mexico or Texas, is that it's really woefully lacking. And that's actually where, obviously, townships ordinances would come into play. So in other words, the setback, instead of 100 feet from Cuomo's front door, would be a mile or whatever. That's the first thing. The one thing about the SGEIS and these regs in general is, in most states, what happens is that rather than ban the activity outright in a municipality, they do, as the Seward bill anticipates, they regulate it based on zoning districts. So in other words, in the town of Rochester, for instance, drilling would be allowed in an industrial zone district and not allowed in a commercial or retail or resident, and if it was, it would be done by SUP. That may be where that Seward language comes from. There are exceptions to that in Santa Fe County, and counties can regulate land use in some states, notably Colorado, New Mexico. Santa Fe County is they've done composite overlays that make it very difficult to drill a well in the county at all. But they did it through composites of vegetation, of hydrology, of steep slope, of historic sites. You add all those composites up and you're not left with many places to punch holes, which is the way they wanted it. Now back to compulsory integration. New York State, as practice, has probably one of the worst compulsory integration laws in the United States. Some states, including Pennsylvania, have no compulsory pooling law whatsoever. Other states, like Texas, rarely use compulsory integration to push somebody into a well. In New York, they have modified the law kind of in the sort of the waning minutes of one of the sessions in 2005, which is, of course, the same year that Cheney fracked the EPA out of the drilling business. And that's a coincidence. And the problem is that in New York State, the DEC, which is nominally the environmental agency, enforces the compulsory integration. They have already enforced people. They were actually, couples were forced to participate in, believe it or not, an Anschutz well, which is a vertical well in New York State. And they only had a quarter of an acre, but they made them, to make up the well spacing of maybe 40 acres, they basically pushed these people into the well. Into participating in the well, which means, that their well got gassed and now their house is worthless. That's probably wouldn't happen in Texas because it's just they're remiss or they're reluctant to enforce that kind of compulsory pooling. One other point, in the case of horizontal hydrofracking, compulsory integration is not applicable geologically, because the whole notion of compulsory pooling is that you're going to drain a reservoir from somebody else's house or from under somebody else's property, and that it should be pooled for the common good. In the case of a horizontally hydrofrac well, the only way you're going to, quote, drain anything from under that under property is to run the lateral under it. So from a geological standpoint, it really has no basis to be applied to horizontal wells. Thank you.
Thank you, Chip. For Jannette, a couple of questions. In the E&E study, are the figures for indirect benefits and multipliers that they use, are they at all realistic? Can you talk to us about dairy industry? New York and Pennsylvania are, both large dairy producers. Do we have any information on the effects on dairy production in Pennsylvania? And if this is okay, do you believe that E&E, the company hired to do the economic and sociological study, perhaps had any conflict of interest due to its normal sources of income?
Took some notes to try to remember the questions. The indirect benefits and multipliers, that gets to my criticism of them using input-output models from RIMS 2 as a standalone technique. Those input-output multipliers are, we have no idea what the multipliers will really be for an industry that doesn't exist in a region right now. And hydraulic fracturing for natural gas does not exist in the Marcellus region of New York. And so whatever numbers they got from BEA for the input-output coefficients from which they get the multipliers, they're totally just off the wall because we really have no idea. So I would say they're probably inaccurate, and if they are accurate, it's the luck of the draw. The dairy industry, I had quite a while ago, when I first started looking into this, like 3 years ago, I was trying to find comparable multipliers by industry. And at the time, I had only seen the 2009 DEIS. And I believe that the overall multiplier that was used there was 1.4 for the natural gas industry in the Marcellus region of New York. And I believe I had also found multipliers on the order of 2.2 or 2.3 for the dairy industry. So therefore, it seems that we should be encouraging dairy industry as opposed to the natural gas industry if we want to improve the employment situation. And also, not only that, but it seems logical that all agricultural areas, including dairy, could be very negatively impacted, not just by the possibility of pollution of land and water and air, but also because people won't want to buy the produce from the area and the brand. And even if the produce is not negatively affected from a health standpoint, it'll have a reputation of being contaminated produce. So in terms of numbers, I don't actually have numbers in Pennsylvania of dairy farms going, but I have heard that anecdotally that some farmers have just closed up business and moved away. And I would love to get those numbers. If anybody has those numbers, send them to me or send a source. And regarding E&E as a firm, when I first heard that they hired E&E, I immediately went to their website to check them out, and I saw no economist on staff. So I was kind of surprised that they did an economic analysis. And then I thought, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'll assume that they subcontracted out to some economic firm. And there was no mention of that in the report. So I don't know who they used as an economist. I also know from their website that they have done work for the oil and gas industry in the past, and apparently continue to do so. So there may be conflict of interest That's about all I know about it. Thank you.
All right, I've just gotten a couple questions. Remember, this is a session about the SGEIS and how to comment, but I'll be very quickly answer a couple things here. Can our local government still proceed to ban or limit fracking based on current regulation? Absolutely. Can't we write to the governor thanking him for his idea to go to Pennsylvania and check out the scene there? Absolutely. I will let Barbara Lifton answer this one. To go a little beyond the SGEIS, because December 12th is that deadline. January 1st is the new session of the legislature. They'll certainly be looking at budget issues first, but we expect this to hit front and center. All last year and the year before, when we were lobbying, they would say, well, we can't really do anything till we see what the DEC says. Well, now they've seen what the DEC says. So to Barbara, are state senators from Delaware and Sullivan counties responsive to the 3/4 of their constituents who are opposed to drilling, and can they be possible allies in this fight? And I think that also not even Chemung, Broome, and Tioga officials are not all as pro-drilling as some people think. So if you want to talk about that. Just if you want to talk about allies, where do you see allies from other parts of the state? In particular, are Sullivan and Delaware County legislators aware of the opposition locally?
I wish I had a good answer on that. I mean, it's been tough enough to get Assembly allies, Democratic allies in the Assembly from that region because, I think initially at least, and this new poll, I haven't actually seen this new data, and that might be very useful to have in persuading more people. Senator Bonasek down in Sullivan, Delaware County areas, I don't know if he's all Sullivan or all, I think he's both, I don't know. Has gone on a few bills. The problem is you can see that there's some moves in the Senate to go on a bill, or Seward has now drafted this local control bill. And I didn't hear it. Someone said that Senator Seward was on, was it the Our Better show the other day, last week? And said that, and she said, so what about the prospects for your bill in the Senate? And he said, well, there are 3 majority members on the bill, and then, maybe the Democrats in the Senate can help us get it through. Am I right? Did someone hear that? That's what I was told, he said. Well, anyone who understands how the legislature functions knows that the Democrats in the Senate are not going to get as I said before, not going to get a major bill. And this is a major bill. This is not a little county tax bill or some little tweaking. This is a major bill, and with statewide ramifications of a very important nature having to do with gas drilling. So it is not going to happen with Democrats trying to push it through the Senate unless they run the Senate, unless they're in control of the Senate, which they are not. So that's just a disingenuous comment about how to try to get this done. We need to ask, just as I'm sometimes asked to push my leadership to do something, we need to ask all the senators, and especially the majority senators who run the Senate, to push their leadership, push their colleagues, work with their colleagues, get more sponsors on bills, and push the leadership of the Senate to do some of these critical, couple of these critical bills. And I think, starting with a moratorium to keep looking at this issue carefully. We're certainly not ready. Did I answer, Martha? Is that adequate?
Yeah. Do you want to take a minute and talk about other prospects, other legislation you think might have key pieces this session?
She's asking about other legislation. Do you mean in both houses? Well, again, we had 3 bills. I'm not sure what Assemblyman Sweeney. We listened, Jannette and Chip both came to our hearing a week ago. They were both one away. I sat and listened to 12 hours of testimony. And, it was wonderful testimony. It was these people and other wonderful, accurate, scientific, not emotional testimony. God forbid we be emotional about our water and our children's future. Science all the way. And, I listened all day, and at 9:30, it was wonderful, and it was also kind of depressing because I'm like, we have all these facts, we have this kind of analysis of the SGEIS that shows that it is greatly lacking and greatly biased, and yet we're not making any progress with either the Senate or the governor. The governor is still pushing forward with the SGEIS, with the DECs pushing the SGEIS. So I was feeling a little worried about how we were going to find allies in state government to push this forward. But we just need to keep, I think this poll is great, and it's an opportunity to mobilize people. A lot of those people apparently are not mobilized. And I know I've got a lot of support from downstate. One of the wonderful things about the hearing is that there were 12 legislators there, and they were from Long Island and from New York City. We have not lost, at least in the Assembly, we have not lost those allies in the Assembly, and we need to find those kind of allies in the Senate. Right now, it's a pretty, rather bleak picture. But we can certainly push Seward and ask him to work with his colleagues in the Senate, not think that the Democrats can get a major bill through the Senate. That is not going to happen. Thank you.
I would point out this is an election year for the Senate and the Assembly. There was a question here about next year, 2012. Right. A question about local ordinances at the county level. I will just say no. Counties don't have land use authority. We do have authority over roads, and Tompkins County did pass a road preservation law, but it took a long time, and I think municipalities who really need to get going and get something on the books, even if you're not sure it's perfect, get something on the books. For Ed, are New York State municipal water suppliers currently required to test for methane? For example, how can towns and villages know if their water supply has been gassed due to fracking? And maybe you can talk a little about the CSI efforts to do baseline. And can your list of suggestions for towns, is that up on any website yet?
I can't answer the question on the methane testing. I just honestly don't know that.
Use the mic.
I'm sorry. The question on methane testing, I don't know the answer to that, honestly. So I can't tell you that. The list of recommendations will be up on our website shortly. That's going to be going out in a letter to local municipal officials next week. So that will be up there. I would say one thing about the county that I just have thought about as I've been preparing these remarks today is we do have a county comprehensive plan. It doesn't say in the regulations town, village, or city. It says municipal comprehensive plans. And we didn't specifically address gas drilling in that. So that may be something we do want to look at as an amendment if we feel it's warranted at the county level. Was there another part to that I missed?
You want to talk about CSI?
Oh, CSI. Yes, there is a proposal. It's in the budget discussions right now from the CSI local group, Citizens Science Institute, I believe it stands for. And they want to do baseline testing of water quality in streams in the county so that we would have some data to compare with future testing that might be done should there be an expectation that there's contamination due to any activity associated with gas drilling. So that's currently being considered by the legislature in their budget discussions. Okay.
Thank you, Ed. I'll point out that the video of today's meeting will be up at ShaleShockmedia.org. And I want to thank Chris McConkey and Francis Carver for making this happen. And also at tcgasmap.org, the incredible site that when people go there and see, oh, look at my neighborhood and look where the leased lands are right around my house. That's been the epiphany for a lot of people. So tcgasmap.org and shaleshockmedia.org. That's right. I'd like to ask Chip to come up and talk about, again, this is a little bit off of the SGEIS, but the rush for overseas consumption and the issue of foreign purchasing of leases And how much of this is really for local energy independence?
This is, well, I think the pro-gas people have made a lot out of this being an energy independence initiative, and there's been a lot of flag waving. There was a billboard, I think, down in Pennsylvania, signs about, it was like, drill a well, bring a GI home. I didn't see one. Somebody had to explain that to me. The gas, a lease, a mineral rights lease, is fungible. It's actually treated as a security in Texas. It may be treated as a security in New York, like a share of stock. So they're bought and sold, and after a landman signs that Amish farmer up for $2 an acre, it will get sold, probably, maybe many times, and it may end up being held by an investor from overseas. I know I used to try and raise money in Japan, and I would run ads in Japanese newspapers. So, but the gas itself will go to whoever wants to pay the most money for it, and currently that would be overseas. So in the case of Western gas, it's probably going to go to China and Japan. It'll go out probably through Oregon, through ports there. And this gas will maybe go out through, I'm lost track of where the terminals would be, but it would, say, go out through Bayonne, New Jersey, and whatnot. And it's just because it's a function of if it's worth more over there, net of the transportation costs, then that's what'll happen. So the notion that it displaces petroleum is kind of silly. I used to have a tractor that ran on butane. So obviously you can run, and we had a company in Texas that converted cars to run off on propane. So I mean, you can do it, obviously, but you've been able. There's no need to have a tax incentive to do that. It's either makes sense or it doesn't. People do it all the time in some states. But the notion that it can, it's a direct replacement of petroleum is misleading, and the notion that it's all going to be used here or something is just ridiculous. So I think it's just used to deceive people, those notions. Thank you.
Another left field question, but what can we do to get NPR to report on the negative side of drilling? They sound like gas companies shills. Well, just call and write NPR. Oh, sure, absolutely.
I'll just speak to that briefly. I went down to Pennsylvania 2 or 3 weeks ago. Linda Smith is here, Linda and I and Jordan. And I had, I went out to California in June. Mark Ruffalo emailed me and said, how would you like to go to California with me and look at solar renewable energy? And I said, sure. And he and Josh Fox and I hung out for a couple of days looking at a lot of interesting things. And anyway, 27-hour trip home from San Francisco for me. And I ended up taking one of those little flights home from Philadelphia in the morning. And I'm talking to a guy who says, I do a lot of reporting for NPR. And we're flying over Pennsylvania. I said, well, I've been working on the gas. He knew me. He was from Ithaca. And so he knew who I was, and he knew of the gas drilling issue a bit, although he didn't know about it in depth. So we're flying over, and I said, I'm thinking about coming back down to Pennsylvania and spend a day talking to people and listening to people. And he said, well, if you go, I might like to go with you, so let me know. So we did. We let him know, and he said, yeah, I'll go along. So I won't tell you who he is, but he spent the whole day with us. We were in meetings with 8, 10, 12 people all day long, and it was a real eye-opener for him. And he was taping all day, and he was very interested, and, so we'll see. He may do something with it. I told him, we let him. We said, we were hearing some really fluffy reporting from NPR on this, and if you go to the site, you'll see that they're getting a lot of money from the industry. So, sad.
I listen to NPR all the time, and I'm always hearing the ads for the natural gas industry. And I have to say, I was very excited because, likewise, and maybe you instigated this, I've gotten 2 calls from reporters at NPR to ask me about my take on it. So hopefully we're going to be hearing about that soon, although the industry is pretty powerful with their advertising dollars. So let's wait and see what happens. Thanks.
But let us remember they're a membership organization. Perhaps you can say, here's my check for this year. It would have been 5 times bigger if you did some other reporting. I wanted to mention impacts on state government. We've talked a little bit about impacts on local government. The Governor Cuomo has had appointed an advisory panel on fracking for the DEC, and they were supposed to meet last Thursday. The meeting was canceled, and this is from the newspaper. Canceled because New York State's Department of Health, Department of Transportation, Public Service Commission, and Department of Agriculture and Markets have not completed estimates of the demands that drilling 1,400 new gas wells each year will place on their agencies in terms of staff and resources. Clearly, state agencies are. This is Environmental Advocates of New York Executive Director Robert Moore released this statement. Okay, he is one of the members of that panel. He goes on to say, clearly, state agencies are caught flat-footed by Governor Cuomo's rush to drill. We're less than 2 months from closing the simultaneous comment periods on the environmental impact statement, regulations, and draft permit. And the governor and New York State's agencies still don't know how many tens of millions of dollars this industry will cost the state. And I understand the DEC has said they need, 225 in the first year. 100. How many?
I heard 220 or something.
220 new staff members. Department of Health needs additional staff. So many of these, all these departments really are going to be stressed. And of course, we know that DEC has been cut. The staff has been eviscerated for the last few years. So to Jannette, if you have any analysis or any thoughts on cost to New York State, and we've been talking about sort of tax revenues, but the cost, and then the question here from a participant: do you think the DEC actually handed us a softball on economic impact? The EIS estimated $2.4 billion of projected total earnings over 30 years. Now, current economic impact of competing industries, tourism, agriculture, et cetera, easily totals $500 to $600 billion over that same 30 years. So shouldn't it be easy to refute that $2.4 billion is worth the risk? So the question is that balancing a projection of revenues versus existing industries.
The thing is, existing industries won't just stay as they are. We'll lose a bunch of it. And that's not taken into account in any of the economic assessment, and certainly not in any of the economic studies done by industry. And I haven't done this analysis, but I'm sure it's probably pretty accurate. I think one of the key things we have to always remember here is that the oil and gas industry is highly capital intensive, so it's not really going to help us much in terms of our economy, because jobs create the money, and the money and the jobs create the indirect effects and the induced effects in growing any economy. So we're going to be removing all of that, or some of that, from the industries that decline, and some of those industries will have a much bigger multiplier, as we've mentioned earlier. The cost to the state, I mean, all the costs that I've indicated were ignored. Many of them will affect the state. And one of the big things is, if you look at the state of Arkansas, they estimated that $455 million worth of road damage was done to their state highways alone because of gas drilling there. And they actually have a severance tax, which we don't have. So they can raise money through their severance tax to pay for road repair. And then they even added a little percentage onto it when they realized that the road costs in Arkansas were going to be so high. But even with the percentage added onto it, the state taxpayers are going to have to pay around $400 million themselves to repair the roads that the gas industry has destroyed. So the cost to the state could be very, very high, and I really wish I understood why people like Governor Cuomo don't really seem to admit this. Thank you.
Question for Ed. If you can talk about, I think we need to get a sense of to get a sense of what the seeker process is supposed to include. We talk about socioeconomic impacts. They made an attempt at economic impacts. Is there really any analysis in the SGEIS of social impacts or any discussion of mitigations? Because if they find impacts, they're supposed to identify mitigations. So if you can talk about what a normal process would include. Also, it seems that many of their analyses have to do with a single well pad. How many trucks per well pad, and this issue of cumulative is not really addressed. Can you describe for us how they should have done that? I mean, if there's a way that they, if you were writing it, I wouldn't want you to write, but all right. Well, Ed and then Chip. If you want. Okay.
I don't want to answer for you. I just want to say that the way it usually, just on the answer on the well pads, is the way that you're right. It is done on it's as a one well by well deal, and but that's not the way it's done. Where. When you go to, because wells are drilled in multiples, there's a drilling program in a basin, and so they are submitted as multiple applications, or applications for multiple wells in a quote drilling program in a basin. Nobody shows up with just one well permit application unless it's an exploratory well. So, like for instance, in Colorado, you would show up and they would want to know what your whole program is for the basin. It would be defined as an area wide, and you would submit to the Minerals and Management Agency out there. You would submit what all the wells you intend to drill or get applications for in an area. So even at that level, the state has an opportunity to capture the information and address what the cumulative impact that they know they could anticipate from all those wells. The way the DEC does it, they assume it's just one well at a time. So there isn't even a mindset or a methodology to receive this information or look at this in the way that it's actually going to happen, which would be multiple wells. So I mean that's the only thing I could add to that. So, thank you.
In terms of the seeker process, I think part of the problem with this is the DEC is looking at this as generic impacts of permitting a well site. They still have not made the leap to area-wide cumulative impact analysis. And that's where the socioeconomic analysis would really makes more sense when you look at what's happening on a region. And they haven't really made that leap, although they've given lip service to it in places. The analysis still tends to be what are the impacts of permitting a site, and what are the generic impacts that we have to we can look at and make determinations on in this process. I can only say in another life years ago, worked on socioeconomic impact analysis in the West. And I can remember of a case of gold mining in the Black Hills of South Dakota. And we called every municipality to ask them how many staff would you need to add in public safety and other areas to cope with the impacts of this, and quantified that. And that was of no greater impact than this is going to be in New York State. And that was contracted for because I think it was going to be on federal land, and the federal government required that kind of analysis. New York State is not undertaking that type of analysis here, obviously, and it obviously should before undertaking this major activity that will have a huge impact on our communities. But it's not being looked at that way. Nobody has called me or any other municipality that I'm aware of and said, what's going to be the impacts on your local government when this happens, and how would we quantify that? Because that's the kind of thing you should be doing if you really want to know the full impacts of this type of activity.
I think that's an excellent place to basically end. I hear over and over again that New York has the toughest regulations in the country. So I'm curious, have they actually looked at the other regulations around the country? I don't know. 100 feet from a house. So I'm going to ask each of our speakers to think, while I talk about a couple other things, think about a closing statement if you'd like to make one, anything you forgot to say or want to wrap up or respond to each other. So I want to mention a couple of meetings that are coming up. Residents of Lansing, there's going to be a survey on people's opinions about gas drilling. Contact Tom Butler. Or I'm going to give you an email, tjb2@cornell.edu if you're interested, and I think he might also be here. If he's here, he'll find you. Okay. In Cuyahoga County, the Scipio Firehouse in Scipio Center this Thursday, October 20th, 7 o'clock. Landowners, farm owners, understanding the impact of hydrofracking if you have leased your land or are concerned. Joe Heath, General Counsel of the Onondaga Nation, will be speaking Thursday in Scipio Center at 7 o'clock. What?
Well, I just want to add that we're small in size, so we're trying to get like the Cuyahoga County residents there as priority.
Okay, Cuyahoga County especially. All right. Excuse me. Compulsory integration was discussed. There's a meeting on November 14th, 7 to 9 in the Dryden Fire Hall about compulsory integration. And again, another event. Wednesday, October 19th, how to craft and adopt local laws to protect land and natural resources. Wednesday, October 19th, Cortland County Office Building, 60 Central Avenue in Cortland, and a teach-in at SUNY Cortland on hydrofracking and the SGEIS, November 16th, 4 to 9 p.m. There are a lot of tables in the back, and we'll put these notices back there. And again, the 4 hearings, these have been publicized pretty well. The 4 hearings from that DEC is holding, November 16th in Dansville, November 17th, the Forum Theater in Binghamton, November 29th, Sullivan County Community College in Loch Sheldrake, and November 30th at Tribeca Performing Arts Center in New York City, and December 1st at the State Theater on State Street in Ithaca. That's probably going to be 7 o'clock. So again, just to thank everybody for coming, I would like to invite you all to have your closing statements, and then we'll be around for a little while. We have the room for a little longer. But let me start with Jannette. Okay.
Well, thank you again for having me. And there are just 2 things that I really want to close with, and it's asking you all to do a couple of things. First, I have been so surprised at the results of, I guess surprise is not actually true, just relieved to see the results of the 2 polls that were countywide, Delaware County and Sullivan County. And now this is, I know, another county, and some of you represent other counties. So if you could raise money to hire independent pollsters to survey all of your counties, and if we get all the similar results and we can send those in, I think that's going to help us with getting what we want. So that's one thing. And the second thing I want you all to do is to write as many good comments as you can and submit them before December 12th. And please also insist on a comprehensive, unbiased economic assessment that includes all costs and as accurately as possible includes the benefits. Thank you.
Well, as I said, I went to Pennsylvania. I think I'll just wrap with this. I think everyone knows where I am and what I think we ought to be doing. But I went to Pennsylvania about 3 weeks ago and spent all day listening to people. And there are people in Pennsylvania with barium poisoning who, didn't know what was wrong with them. The doctors didn't know what was wrong with them. They couldn't diagnose. They were giving them anti-anxiety drugs, and finally they ended up at Mount Sinai in New York City for treatment. People whose water has been so badly contaminated that they've been on bottled water for many, many, many months, doing everything in their life on bottled water. And people who tried to sell their homes, who are planning to sell their homes, and and even people without leases, or these are not necessarily leaseholders, but people affected by neighboring wells that were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet away. One was 1,200 feet away, and whose home is now essentially valueless. The realtor said, "Take it off the market. There's no point in even trying to sell it. The value is, 1/20th what it was last year." So people have had their lives destroyed and upended in Pennsylvania, and by the end of the day, again, I was pretty. It was a very emotional day, and I was pretty upset. And I said, I feel so bad. Here I am going back to New York, and I'm leaving you folks here. I wish there was more I could do for you. Thank you for talking to me, but I feel bad. I'm going to turn around and walk away, and I'm not able to help you here. And they said, well, we appreciate that you've come to listen. It means a lot to us that other people hear our stories, and we just hope that New York doesn't make the mistake that we did. Please go home and tell people what's happened. And we hope anything you do might somehow indirectly help us here in Pennsylvania. And by the way, some of us may be coming there to live. We've been up there. We know how beautiful it is. We may have to leave our homes. They're so valueless at this point, and start our lives over. So please keep New York the way it is, so we can move there safely. So, that's the message that we need to, we heard this all day about all the flaws in this document, and that this document can't be the guidance for dealing with this. And just more and more you see that it really can't be done. It can't be done safely. That's why I and others are calling for the moratorium. I hope we'll see another moratorium bill. I believe we will in the Assembly, that Sweeney will continue his moratorium bill, and I think we should certainly make that a priority in the session ahead. Keep delaying this because it can't be done safely, and just keep mobilizing people. Thank you.
I think Chuck's saving the best for last. So, as Chuck mentioned, in the West you can find places where you could drill maybe a mile from somebody's house. You can't in the East. That's not the way we're developed. And I go back to, what you can do at the local level is you can have a local plan that says what your vision for your community is, and there's at least an into the process to say that this may not be consistent with your community's vision for its future. And I think that may be the starting point for pushing back, if that's not what you want, and let communities. I think Barbara's bill is so critical, because the ability for local control and local influence on the decisions that affect the local community is critical to this, resolving this in our favor as a community. So I would look at your local community first, and make sure you comment and support the legislation that will establish local control without legal threats of it being overturned. Thanks.
That's what I was going to say, Ed. that is literally what I was going to say. It is really important to do this, to take action on a local level, to elect local officials, to county officials, town officials that will adopt zoning ordinances that'll protect you and road use ordinances that'll protect you. That's just a must. It's also important to get in touch with the senators that can be the swing issue on the Lifton Seward bill, Nozzolio, Grisanti. And frankly, what I would tell them is that every state, every red state that does this out west has home rule that applies to zoning. There's nothing, non-red about having home rule apply at the county level in some states and at the township level. So, and it makes you wonder rhetorically, who do they think they're pleasing here? It's not, because it's not a Republican red state thing on a national basis. So that leaves, who does that leave? I think that's important. I think those are the two things I would focus on. The last thing is I really would, if you haven't already, get those comments in to the SGEIS and on the fracking regulations, and you should copy those responses to the DOH, who has been a no-show in this process, and you should copy it to Cuomo, who's also been a no-show on this process. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, our volunteers who've been terrific today. Just give us a hand. The Tompkins County Council of Governments also has a gas drilling task force, and there's a lot of information up there on our website, TCOG, TCCOG. I will also remind you of the elections coming up November 8th. There are some palm cards in the back for the Dryden Democrats, Marianne Sumner, Linda Levine, and Joe Solomon, who are fighting to keep the ban on drilling in Dryden. The Caroline candidates, Irene Weiser. Oh, hi, Irene. Hello. And Aaron Snow. Critical to creating an anti-drilling majority in the town of Caroline. And there are similar kind of issues and races and candidates across the state. I know that for a fact. So November 8th is really important. Get involved. One other thing, Barbara mentioned the Susan Arbetter's show. It's called the Capitol Press Room, Capitol with an O, and she has podcasts for all the shows, and she has done a lot on drilling. She asks really good questions. She had Tom West and Greg Sovas on the other day. Tom West is the attorney for the gas companies, especially for Anschutz that's suing Dryden, and Greg Sovas is the one who claims credit for much of the environmental conservation law. They were talking about how tough these regulations are. These are the toughest in the country. And, if the regulations go through as written, then it just won't be economic, and the companies just won't come to New York. So we got the SGEIS toughened up last time. Let's make it even tougher. I think that's our next job. Really, really important. And on to elections and on to the January session with the legislature. Thank you all for coming. Have a good day.